Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Today on the program. Destruction. And devastation.
Ating gobyerno ay nagbibigay sa kanila ng huling pagkakataon para kahit papaano ay itama yung mga maling ginawa nila.
This was Marawi City in the middle of a war. 1 year later, its residents are picking up the pieces to rebuild their lives. We get to know their stories, what's been done so far, and how much more is left to do.
Meron tayong long-term societal goal, gusto natin resilient, yung ang Marawi City.
This is a special presentation of The Source, the Battle of Marawi. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pinky Webb. Today marks the first year since Marawi came under siege. A solemn tribute will be held to honor those who died defending the city from ISIS-inspired fighters, a battle that dragged on for 5 months. More than 50 people are still missing since the war broke out, and their families have yet to find closure. Let's go straight to the sources of the story. In Marawi City, we have our correspondent, George Cahiles, and joining us here in the studio, Task Force Bangon Marawi spokesperson, Assistant Secretary Kristoffer Purisima. CNN Philippines extensively covered the Marawi siege from the start of the hostilities a year ago until the city was liberated in October. George Cahiles is our first correspondent to be deployed to Marawi City when the war broke out. George, what's it like to be back in Marawi?
You know, Pinky, it's like I always say, Marawi is personal to me. That's why whenever I come here in Marawi, I experience or I get that mixed of feelings, no? Anticipation, waiting for changes here in Marawi, hoping that, I'll be seeing this city back on its feet and somehow anticipating to talk to people and get their stories, know what's happening on the ground. Kaya lang, most of the time, whenever I talk to people, alam mo yung pakiramdam na pinaglalaroan yung feelings mo. Because they're somehow you sense the anguish, but they're hopeful as well. So, ang hirap i-process sometimes because you still feel, you can still see how people are still struggling to go back to their normal lives.
You know, George, I can imagine the first time nakarating ka dyan sa Marawi, the kind of, danger, number one, you had to face, and the surprise and the shock seeing Marawi as it is. Siyempre, hindi ka naman nakapasok immediately, papunta pa lang, I can imagine the kind of anticipation you were feeling. But can you tell us more about, I want to go back a little bit to your experience when you first stepped foot there.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, it's something that you really don't want to do, covering a war. Because war means destruction, that means death. So when we arrived here in the area, you see people desperately going to a safer place. So when you talk to them, talagang ramdam mo yung takot, ramdam mo yung pagmamadali nila, and they do not even know what's happening. What they know is that someone or a group attacked their place, and it's called ISIS. But apparently, it's called the Mountain Group, no? So, pagdating natin dito, it's very chaotic. Hindi natin alam kung anong mangyayari, and then may mga nakita pa tayong mga miyembro ng ISIS doon sa malapit na area lang dito sa provincial capital kung saan tayo nakatayo ngayon. So, it's really bothering. At the same time, you think about your safety, you think about the story that you will produce, you think about the people around you. So kumbaga, overwhelmed ka sa nangyayari sa paligid mo. And it's hard for a reporter, for a journalist to manage to produce something out of those things na iniisip mo rin yung sarili mo, yung safety mo at saka noong crew mo.
So yun, George, kasi importante nga dyan yung protection mo. That's number one. Pangalawa, yung the kind of story na ipapalabas mo, the package that you will put forward, no, na ipapalabas natin sa ating mga newscasts. Pangatlo, syempre, yung mga facts. At pang-apat siguro, darating din yung pagkatao mo na gusto mo din tumulong sa mga nakakasalamuha mo dyan. But, you know, George, also, naaalala ko kasi marami dyan, di ba, yung live reports mo ay nasa Kapitolyo, hindi ba? Tapos, there were a couple of times, George, na there would be bombings while you would do live reports here on CNN Philippines.
That's right. Kaya nga, especially the first time that the military did airstrikes. Kumbaga, a day after they said that they will not use airstrikes, biglang after the press conference, umuugong na dito sa may Capitol complex and we're hearing bombs from not so far away. And it's somehow you're worried about what's happening on the ground for the fact that there's still some trapped civilians inside. So you're worried about what's going to happen and how about the welfare and the safety of those people inside. Kami nandito kami sa Capitol Complex and we know for a fact that we are safe somehow, no? Pero yung mga taong na-trap sa loob, you'll never know. That's right. Kaya we tried our best to inform the public of what's happening here and to let them know how dangerous the situation here that time. And talagang ginagawa natin yung lahat ng magagawa natin because Marawi, the stories of Marawi are stories of the people, and the people should know what's happening.
Yeah. As the last question, George, what are you seeing now? Ano bang nakita mo from the last time you were there? How has it changed?
Actually, yung Marawi, meron siyang dalawang mukha. It has two faces right now. The safe area, kung saan yung economic activities, nagsisimula na siya, people already went back to their homes, trying to live normally. Tapos sa kabilang banda naman, you see the ground zero, wherein talagang sira na yung area.
Yeah.
But you see those people residing in that ground zero, na nandun pa rin sa mga evacuation centers, they are striving to live every day in a situation na talagang ayaw nating mapunta tayo doon. Ang daming factors, no? Nagkakasakit sila, malinis na tubig. Those are the issues that the government must tackle right now and they must address. Lalo na yung issue ng housing. Dahil sa ngayon, marami pa rin or hundreds or even thousands of families are still staying in evacuation centers. Wala pa sila dun sa mga temporary sites. And the government, marami pa silang kailangan gawin. Marami pa silang kailangan itayong temporary shelters.
Yeah.
So sa statistics na nakuha natin, ang target 6,400 and yet more than 1,500 pa lang yun na itatayo. So marami pang pwedeng gawin and we're looking forward that, sooner or later matapos na ito at magkaroon ba ng sense of normalcy yung mga tao sa Marawi.
Yan ang mga tanong natin sa gobyerno because we have ASEC Purisima here in the studio. In the meantime, George Cahiles, maraming salamat sa iyo. George Cahiles joining us live from Marawi City. Thank you, George. We now have in the studio Task Force Bangon Marawi spokesperson Kristoffer Purisima. ASEC, good morning.
Good morning.
Yung mga tanong po ni George, umpisahan na natin. I think that, to give a clear picture, he gave us quite a clear picture on this, that there is the safe zone and there is ground zero. Before we went on air, sir, we were talking about this. Can you give us an overview coming from government?
Yes, in terms of the rehabilitation and recovery of Marawi City, we're talking about two things. First is the rehabilitation and recovery of the most affected area, which we previously called ground zero or the main battle area. And then the second is the rehabilitation and recovery of the areas outside the most affected area. For the most
Ito yung
affected...
tinatawag ni George na safe zone.
Yes,
Tama ba, sir?
yes,
Okay.
relatively the safer zones. No, for the most affected area, we're looking at around a rehabilitation cost of 22 billion pesos. This may still change depending on the final negotiations with the prospective developer and after the conduct of the Swiss challenge. And we target the groundbreaking to be around the third week of June. Okay, for the most affected area. For the area outside the MAA, we're looking at around 53 billion pesos in terms of rehabilitation and recovery cost. These involve short-term and medium-term projects, activities, and programs, or PAPs. These short-term PAPs will be those doable for this year, 2018, and the rest are for between 2019 and 2022. So we're looking at 53 billion. So the total rehabilitation and recovery cost estimate as of today is around 75 billion pesos.
22 billion on
The most affected
most
area.
MAA, as you
Yes,
call it,
the
most
MAA.
affected area, and 53 billion on the, well, safer zone. And
Yes.
sir. Let's start with the most affected area, sir. How much of the 22 billion has been released or utilized?
None of it has been released yet because we're still going to finalize the negotiations and the contract for the most for the developer of the most affected area. We should be able to finish the negotiations within a week or 10 days at most. After that, we will publish the terms of the negotiations with this initial consortium, which is the Bagong Marawi Consortium. Then these negotiation points or these contract points will be subjected to Swiss challenge. So technically, hindi pa itong Bagong Marawi Consortium ang developer.
Sigurado, oo.
Hindi pa yan a final approval. So after the Swiss challenge, kung merong mas makapagbigay ng better price,
Yeah.
relatively, sabihin kaya namin to ng 21 or 20 or even lower in terms of billions of pesos, yun ang pwedeng piliin ng task force through its selection committee and through the chair. At pagkatapos nun, award na natin ang kontrata at mag-groundbreaking na tayo.
When is the awarding, you think, of the contract? Whether somebody gives a better challenge to the original bid, sir?
Perhaps mid-June.
Okay, that's why you said groundbreaking
yes,
would be third
groundbreaking will be
week.
third week.
When you say groundbreaking, Asek, anong ibig sabihin nun? What can we see?
Well,
Or is it just
first of all,
ceremonial?
it'll be relatively ceremonial in the sense that wala pa tayong makikitang construction because the first order of the day would be debris management, debris clearing. And this will take a few months.
At kasama to dito sa contractors? So
Kasama
sila
yan.
Okay.
It's one of the 16 minimum requirements that we identified that the contractor, the developer has to do. So, unang-una yan, debris clearing. After ng debris
Ibig
clearing...
sabihin, tanggalin mo yung ano? Yung
Yes, marami
lahat
yan.
ng-
Lahat yan, pwede. And we're looking at recycling some of the debris for cement. So, para naman maging sustainable rin ang ating building back better ng Marawi. Pagkatapos nitong debris clearing na to, hopefully, pagkatapos ng horizontal development din, pag-aayos ng mga kalye, ng mga daan, relative clearing nito, papayagan na natin ang residents ng most affected area na makabalik at mag-rebuild ng kanilang mga pamamahay. So that is after the horizontal development. Subject, of course, to getting permits from the local government unit.
Parang mahaba-haba pa ho, no?
Yes, mahaba-haba. Although may mga nagsasabi na, for example, natatagalan dahil wala pa silang nakikita.
Yeah.
Ngunit masalimuot talaga to dahil ito ay conflict-affected area at hindi madali na i-rebuild ang isang conflict-affected area, lalo na in an urban setting na marami kang nasirang mga gusali, pamamahay, kailangan mo siyempre munang i-clear. And of course, nandyan rin yung mga issue ng unexploded ordnance.
Yeah.
85%, I think that's the figure we're looking at. And in the next few months, kukumpletuhin yan.
So may
ng ating
15%
EUP.
pang,
yes. Meron pang
posibleng tinitingnan pa?
Yes. Hopefully in the next few months, tapos na.
Yeah.
Dahil kailangan na nga ng debris management.
We'll still be talking about the most affected area and the other part of Marawi, which is the safer zone. How does government call it, sir?
Well, we call it outside the most
Okay.
affected area, or the
Outside
non-MAA. Yeah.
or the non-MAA. We'll still be talking about that after the break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Coming up, we'll also be talking to Lanao del Sur Crisis Management Committee spokesperson Zia Alonto Adiong. And later, we speak to the soldier who wrote a song titled Bangon Marawi in the early weeks of the war. You're watching a special edition of The Source. It's been a year since the first shots were fired and the city of Marawi came under siege. Now residents are slowly picking up the pieces and the government is all out in helping Marawi get back on its feet. But what are the challenges Marawi residents face after the war? We have Llano del Sur Crisis Management Committee spokesperson, Assemblyman Zia Alonto Adiong, joining us from Marawi City. Assemblyman, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Good morning, Pinky. It's a pleasure.
Sir, can you tell us the situation on the ground now? How has it been a year after the siege?
Well, we are starting to move forward little by little. I guess the challenge is really overwhelming. We don't deny that. And there's still a problem as to the identification of the areas where the Task Force Bangon Marawi can put up the permanent shelter. The temporary shelter, they have already constructed it, Site 1, Site 2, and Site 4. But there are still families who are still living in evacuation centers, and that has been one of the most pressing problems and challenges what we are facing right now. Basically, the concern of the IDPs, as both the IDPs in evacuation centers and the home beside us, especially those families who have lost everything. Their houses were destroyed in the most affected area, is the insurance that they will be compensated by the government in terms of building back their houses and their properties. So it's really, well, today is the anniversary, but there's nothing to celebrate really, Pinky. So we have a simple program today here in Provincial Capital, and then in the afternoon we will distribute 5,000 packs, which is on top of the ongoing relief operation that we also complement with the efforts of the DSWD. So basically that's the general sentiment right now. The challenge is still there, and we're trying to do our best working with the FBM, Task Force Bangon Marawi.
Yeah, so I guess, Assemblyman, what you're saying is the focus will still be the building of the temporary shelters, because as you said, there are still residents living in evacuation centers. Can you give us a number, sir? Ilan pa ho ba ang nananatili sa mga evacuation centers?
Well, I actually don't have the exact figure right now, Pinky, but most of there are families who have already been given and awarded units in the temporary shelter. So decrease na po yung number ng ating mga IDPs in the evacuation centers. But there are still a number of families. One family in the evacuation center is already too much, no? Dapat nga lahat na mabigyan na rin ng temporary shelter. So yun talaga yung pinaka-challenge, no? Because
of course, sir.
Ang basic naman talaga ng pangangailangan ng tao is actually a roof, no? Somewhere they can really feel comfortable and protection from the sun and from the rain.
Right.
So that's basically one of the pressing problems and challenges that we're continuously working on.
Maliban po, Assemblyman, sa the temporary shelters, excuse me, sir, ano pa ho ba, what is next that government should really be looking into? I know you talked about housing as well, the kind of financing that government should or will. How will they assist the residents? What are they telling you, sir?
Well, I think we need to put more effort on providing livelihood assistance, programs that would spur economic life in the city. We have to be more concerned with providing socio-economic projects to the people that are displaced. Because number one, if you have businesses or livelihood for the people, even if they are displaced or even if they are away from their regional, from their homes, from Marawi City, still they can do business and they can do earnings someplace else. So I think that's one of the one of the things that we need to develop further. As to sabi nga ni Sir Toby, there's already allocated budget for programs, economic programs and activities outside of MAA, and perhaps we can also use that, develop further mechanics on how to provide livelihood assistance to the displaced people. In the provincial capital, what we did is we actually had partnered with NGOs And we provided livelihood assistance, technical assistance to the displaced women. We actually provide them weaving facility so that they can also learn how to do dressmaking and then later on make their own, their living. No? So it's important that dislocation from the area of their origin doesn't necessarily mean that they're also dislocated from opportunities. We have to bridge that gap. Kasi right now, wala sila doon sa kanilang mga pamamahay.
True.
And they're facing an uncertain future. So we really have to bridge the gap by providing business and businesses livelihood assistance to the people.
And sir, as a last question for those who may want to help the people of Marawi, paano ho ba, saan ho kayang area pwedeng pumasok yung mga gustong tumulong?
Well, we already had the link with the PDRF, yung Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, and we also partnered with the Philippine Franchise Association. Yung mga NGOs po na tumutulong din po sa atin, nagpupool po sila ng mga donors doon doon sa partnership po ng LGU at ng mga international humanitarian organizations, NGOs. But if they want to go directly, for example, provide assistance, they can either go to Task Force Bangon Marawi because we also need to manage yung pumapasok po na tulong. Here in the provincial capital, we have a menu, what we call menu. Kung ano po yung kailangan ng mga tao natin, mga evacuees or doon sa mga temporary shelters, and if any organization willing to help out, they just have to look at the menu and we also need to know kung ano yung pwede nilang itulong so that it can fit perfectly to the needs of in a certain area ng mga evacuees. So they can either go directly to Task Force Bangon Marawi and also communicate with the local governments of Marawi City and Lanao del Sur.
And thank you for joining us, sir. Lanao del Sur Crisis Management Committee spokesperson, Zia Alonto Adiong. Maraming salamat, sir. We'll be taking a short break. We'll get to know more about the rehabilitation efforts in Marawi City. Task Force Bangon Marawi spokesperson Kristoffer Purisima tells us more after the break. It says there are almost 80 billion pesos needed for full rehabilitation, and yet so far you're looking at a target of about 75 billion. So, sir, just let's look into Assemblyman Adiong's concerns. Evacuation centers, can you give us a number? How many evacuation centers are still there, and how many families are still living in evac centers?
We still have around 1,097 families in 40 evacuation centers in Region 10 and 40, yes, in Region 10 and ARMM. But most of our IDPs, internally displaced persons, are with their relatives, with their friends, with their families.
So that's the IDPs that are with their families is separate from the 1,000 families still living in 40 evac centers.
Yes.
So iba pa ho yun.
Yes, and we're providing them with relief, with relief goods.
So maybe the question, sir, is why is it taking a while to build temporary shelters so that they can leave the evacuation centers and stay in temporary shelters, sir?
We have to identify more land, more available land on which to build these temporary shelter sites, as we call them. We already have a temporary shelter site in Barangay Sagunsongan, and there are a number of families already living there, around 600 plus families already living there. And we have to identify additional areas where we could build these temporary shelters and even permanent shelters as we continue to rebuild the most affected areas.
But how difficult is it to look for a place, sir? Anyway, it's just temporary, hindi ho ba?
Well, of course, there are certain complexities, certain sensitivities in identifying land. But we're doing it the fastest way we can, and we're consulting with our stakeholders.
Okay.
Kagaya naman ng ginawa natin sa Barangay Sagunsongan, dun sa transitional shelter site. Yung transitional shelter itself na binuo dun, na 24 square meter transitional shelter, naging resulta ito ng consultations with our stakeholders and even with the local government units, particularly our barangay stakeholders, para ma-identify natin kung ano talaga yung gusto nila in terms of the transitional shelters. And we will replicate this kind of consultation and decision-making process in the additional transitional shelter sites.
But if you say government is doing the fastest it can, we still have a number of, let's put it at 5,000 individuals still living in evacuation centers. That's a little hard possibly to digest, sir, na bakit may natitira pa. I know you're saying you need to identify the land, but with everybody helping out, and I don't know, sir, if I'm making the problem too easy, or looking for a solution that seems so easy, but if everybody is helping out and there's land available na pwede namang ipahiram muna for the sake of the people of Marawi, ganun ba kahirap yun, sir?
Well, no rehabilitation, no relief effort really is easy, no? Post-conflict or kahit post-disaster yan, na natural calamity, no?
Yeah.
Napakahirap niyan, lalo na dun sa magnitude at doon sa number of persons involved. Pero yun nga, binibilisan natin yan. It's really unfortunate, no? We don't want to have IDPs in evacuation centers ng ganito katagal.
Yeah.
But that's the reality at kaya binibilisan natin yung ating mga efforts.
And then another point raised by Assemblyman Adiong was, what kind of financing? Meron na ho ba? Is it set, the kind of financing that government will provide those who want to rebuild their homes, sir?
Congressman Adiong of Lanao del Sur has already filed a compensation bill in Congress. Ito ay pag-aaralan na po ng Kongreso at para ma-determine kung magkano ang maaari nating i-allocate at ibigay sa mga natamaan, lalo na sa most affected areas.
Sa MAA. But
Yes.
sir, ang ibig sabihin ho ba nito na may ibibigay na pera ang gobyerno that is free, and then another part would be a financing
That's
scheme?
part of the discussion still, either free or mixed na free, some grants, and then some loans or some through financing. So hindi pa tayo sigurado yan dyan, but that's the strategic direction. We support that compensation bill filed, and we will participate in the discussions in Congress para alam natin talaga ang gagawin natin at para makaset aside na tayo ng budget para dito sa compensation ng ating
But
mga
why not
kababayan.
tackle it now already?
Yes, it will be tackled very soon, and I wouldn't be surprised if it will be certified as an urgent legislative measure.
Okay, and then, sir, a while ago we talked about the MAA, no? So that's ground zero, that's 22 billion pesos allocated, hopefully groundbreaking the third week of June. How about outside MAA, sir? Give us an overview of what's going on there.
Well, outside MAA, we already have what we call the Bangon Marawi, Comprehensive Rehabilitation and Recovery Program, or BMCRRP. We're just finalizing the programs, activities, and projects that will be part of this comprehensive rehabilitation and recovery plan. Hopefully in the next few weeks, or in the next few weeks, this will be approved already by the President. Because actually, this is the standard that what we do in post-conflict and post-disaster. We have a CRRP. We want to make sure that
And CRRP is
comprehensive rehabilitation and recovery plan. And that's why we're vetting all the programs. We have 800 plus, as of last count, I believe we have 800 plus programs, activities, and projects under this CRRP, this 53 billion CRRP. And we're vetting all these projects, and we're dividing them into short term, meaning those that can be accomplished this year, and medium term, will be accomplished between 2019 and 2022.
Give us an understanding what is in the short term. What
is
could
in the short
possibly
term?
be there?
Well, the repair of relatively untouched or slightly damaged buildings, because we're talking about outside the most affected area. So hindi po ito gaanong damage. Of course, there's still damage and people were still affected. And part of this, this is not just for the city of Marawi, but also for Piagapo and Butig. So kasama nito, repair ng schools, repair ng public infrastructures, konting rebuilding, konting reconstruction.
Yeah.
But then again, the big chunk, kaya malaki to dahil malaki yung area, but the big chunk of the rebuilding in terms of solid rebuilding would be in the most affected area.
Yeah. Meron na ho ba, ano na ho ba ang nagawa na naayos since the war ended?
Well, patuloy ito. I don't have the specific buildings or specific structures.
Well, what about the hospital, sir?
Yes, meron na tayo dahil meron nang nagbukas uli na hospitals. And for example, the schools, certain schools have already been repaired or repaired at ready na sila to receive learners and students during the opening of classes this June. So tuloy-tuloy naman yung ating efforts dyan. No? Kagaya nito na yung pagbabalik rin ng ating mga residents outside the most affected area, nakabalik na sila. Because remember, 96 barangays ang Marawi. 24 barangays ang nasa loob ng most affected area. So the 72 barangays outside the most affected area, nakabalik na po dyan ang ating mga kababayan.
Does it mean, sir, that outside the MAA, life is quite back to normal? Ganun ho ba? Would you describe it as that?
That is what we understand. And of course, one of the mandates of the task force is to return the lives of our communities, of our brothers and sisters there, to normalcy the quickest way possible. And that's what we will do.
What about the timeline? Ano ho ba ang timeline na nakikita ng gobyerno or the government is targeting?
Well, in terms of the most affected area, the target is to rebuild it by December 2021. But in the next year, between now and this time next year, kukumpletuhin natin yung debris management, debris collection. No? So wala pa talaga tayong makikitang construction per se sa most affected area immediately.
In a year, yeah.
Dahil
Nililinis
kailangan muna lilinisin pa. But of course, pag meron ng area na nalinis, magko-construct na tayo.
But that's quite a target, sir, 2021.
Yes. So from around 3 years.
Yeah.
three and
But that's
a half
really
years.
just 2 years of rebuilding because 1 year will be for cleaning out
Yes, correct.
the
We
debris.
understand and we will demand from the developer kung sino man itong mapili na 24/7, 365 ang pagtatayo niya dito.
Okay.
And again, outside the most affected area, we have short-term and medium-term projects.
I really hope that happens, sir. At least yung pag-rebuild is 24/7, 365 days.
Yes.
Sana po mangyari talaga yan.
Yes.
All right. Any more, sir, you'd like to add from, the side of government on task force, Bangon Marawi, sir?
Well, we would like to assure our citizens that, again, as we've been saying all along, the task force is an accountable and a transparent organization, agency, and that we will keep you updated. We will give you periodic reports. We're present in social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and all other forms of social media. You can go to our field office in Iligan for donations and to get updates.
Yeah.
And also, you can go to our offices directly. The task force secretariat has offices at the Office of Civil Defense in Campo Aguinaldo and at HUD-C in Makati.
Housing, yeah. So we talked about that, no, sir. How many houses is supposed to be built? Meron ho bang number?
Well, in terms of the transitional shelters, yung figures na nabanggit kanina, 6,400 transitional shelters and around 3,524 permanent shelters. But this is still outside ito dun sa itatayo uli ng ating mga brothers and sisters sa most affected area.
Yeah, okay. So ito yung what you talked about is just outside
Yes.
the most affected area. All right, there's a lot. This is still a huge challenge, sir. You've only just begun, I guess. And this will take a while. And lots of, siguro, sir, kailangan talaga tutukan.
Yes, kailangan tutukan. And we invite everyone also to check on us, to make sure that we're doing everything the right way. And we welcome all suggestions, criticisms, comments, and obvious naman ito sa consultations. Because, as you know, yung initial target natin ng groundbreaking is around May. No? At na-move ito ng June. This is not a delay.
Yeah.
We just had to consult with other additional stakeholders. No? Kaya, you can say that we sacrificed a bit of our deadlines in order to get more people involved.
Yeah.
Because what we want is a participatory rebuilding and recovery of Marawi City.
Thank you, Task Force Bangon Marawi spokesperson. Assistant Secretary Kristoffer Purisima, maraming salamat and good luck, sir.
Thank you.
We'll be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. A Maranao princess and peace advocate shares her story and advocacy after the break. You're watching a special edition of The Source, a Maranao princess and a peace advocate for many years now. Through her Teach Peace, Build Peace movement, she's been working hard to achieve long-lasting peace in Mindanao. Her mission, to mold young people to become peace builders through education, interfaith, and intercultural activities. Now that the Marawi siege hits close to home, she wants to do more for her fellow Maranaos. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have by Rohanisa Hani Sumndad Usman.
Yes.
Hani, good to finally see you in person.
Yeah. A peaceful morning po. And of course, Assalamu alaikum to our Muslim viewers. Ramadan Kareem also to our Muslim brothers and sisters.
Yeah, is that something I can say also?
Yes,
Ramadan,
yes, Ramadan Kareem. Yes.
All right, sa ating mga Muslim brothers and sisters. Hani, kamusta? Siguro, let's just do a little bit of a balikan lang po natin yung siege. Nasaan kayo during the siege of Marawi?
We were in Manila. Our group was still in Manila, but we were about to conduct a peace mission on May 25 po dapat. And then when the siege happened, we had to cancel our peace mission. So what we did was, on the second day of siege, we had a meeting and then we launched We Are One with Marawi campaign to start getting peace gifts for our Maranao brothers and sisters. So at the time, we decided to collect, of course, kung ano yung pinakakailangan po nila. So we started with hygiene kits kasi we discovered that our government had already been providing for food at that time. So sabi naman yung mga hygiene kits. And then as an organization focusing on children, we also collected what we call hope kits for children. So we were able to reach out to 3,600 families and 6,000 children. So our hope kits contain stuffed toys, coloring materials,
crayons,
peace-themed coloring books, because we really wanted them to, even if they experience that kind of situation, we really wanted to inject in them the path of peace, what peace is all about. So when we start 10 days after the siege, that's the time we conducted our peace mission already.
So that's
10
when
days.
you actually started, 10 days after
Yes,
the
10
siege.
days after.
And anong naabutan mo when you actually, nung nakapasok na kayo?
Ayun, we went to some of the evacuation centers. Nung pagdating po namin doon, halos pinipigilan po namin umiyak. We were so overwhelmed. Because they were just sleeping on the floors. I've been in this kind of mission for so many years already, but every time I visit an evacuation center, parang parehas pa rin yung pakiramdam na ganun pa rin yung pakiramdam sa akin.
Hindi ka na mamanhid, no?
Hindi talaga. Lalo na I really love kids. And lalo na maisip mo, like, we had one story, isa sa mga kwento nung volunteers namin, he interviewed this child and then he said, ang kanyang unan ay sako ng bigas at ang kanyang blanket ay tarpaulin. So imagine that kind of trauma, that kind of situation that children have to undergo at a very, very young age. And that's why for our group, yung Teach Peace, Build Peace movement, that's why we continue conducting peace education sessions for children.
So what was it like? So nakapasok kayo after 10 days, ang gulo-gulo pa nun. They were probably surely cramped in evacuation centers. How were the kids like? Papaano yung kanilang pakikitungo sa inyo?
Ayun, at first, of course, when we introduced ourselves, lahat sila parang, assalamu alaikum, ate, kuya, ganyan. And then, at first, they were really quiet. And when we started playing with them, when we started conducting yung Arts for Peace sessions namin, dun na sila po nag-open up. And what really surprised us was when we asked about their hopes and dreams.
What did they say?
Ayun, and between the age bracket of 7 to 12 years old, some of the kids mentioned that they wanted to join a group wherein, you know, doing
hindi
violent
magandang
acts.
grupo
Yes.
ang gusto. Bakit ganon, honey? Bakit ganon ang naging pakiramdam nila?
Yung iba pong kwento, some of them really had, you know, a first-hand experience with them, and they, during that time, they gave food to them, and then they said, you know, don't worry, kami na magbabayad niyan, ito. So what happened was, if you know, on a child psychology point of view, no, nagkaroon na po sila ng confusion between what is right and wrong.
And who is good and who is bad?
Who is good and who is bad.
Yeah.
That's why in our peace education sessions, together with Create and Learning Path School, which also has been a very strong advocate of peace education, we did a values clarification. Para just to develop their critical thinking skills, kung ano ba ang peaceful and not peaceful, ano ba yung good and bad.
Yeah. Okay.
Because in all throughout the years that we have been doing this, that's what we realized. I mean, these kids, even older generations, will always be exposed to negativities all around us. Will always be exposed to conflict, to violence. That's why we have to develop their critical thinking skills for them to decide, wait, mali ito ah.
Ano yung
Dapat ito yung
tama?
tinatahak ko.
Yeah.
Ayun. So we continue nurturing that kind of peacefulness or kind of goodness that we all have. And paano sila magre-respond
Yeah.
dun sa form of conflict na ikakaharap po nila.
Grabe din yun, ano? You really need to think about how to address them and how to manage yung pag-iisip nila, which is one way of doing it, as you said, yung critical thinking analysis nila.
Yes,
Kailangan
yes.
malaman anong tama, anong mali, anong good, anong bad,
Yes.
what's positive, what's negative.
Yes, yes.
At kailan kapag niloloko ka.
Yes, yes.
Parang ganun, ano? So, and then months after the war, after the liberation of Marawi, what was it like?
When we went back there, kasi sa nakikita nating situation ngayon, no, not just in the country but all over the world, there's a need for us to think of strategic ways to secure peace on a stronger and more sustainable foundation. Sobra.
Which is
and
how?
For us, yung tinatawag po nating culture of peace, it should be seen as a core of humanity because of what is happening all over the world. And for us, the best and most sustainable way is peace education. And so ngayon po, kasi when the siege happened, we really had a lot of efforts, and one of which is we really strengthened our I Teach Peace facilitators in the ground. So we created a Lanao Circle, and we have efforts also for Maguindanao. So we created a Maguindanao Circle.
And that's
so
what you call it?
Yeah,
Lanao
circles.
Circle,
Our mga brothers and sisters are circles. Yan. So ngayon po, mag-1 year na, no? Months after po nun, what we did was we expanded our program, which we call Schools and Communities of Peace Heroes Formation Program. So we have this peace hero principle na at a very young age, or whoever you are, whatever sector you belong to, pwede ka maging peace hero. So we created that peace hero principle. And yung
Maganda yun, yeah.
So yung Schools and Communities of Peace Heroes Formation Program po namin, it was designed, it's a holistic approach to peace education. It was designed to cultivate knowledge, skills, attitudes, behavior, and values towards a culture of peace. Na, yun, teaching them about the art of peaceful living, no matter what happens. It's teaching them about building a culture of peace and resiliency. Yun po ang so we expanded. We now have 4 schools in Marawi. So we expanded in Lanao area, Baloi and Sagiran, kung saan po yung mga IDP learners po natin. And they're now following their what we call Peace Education Development Journey Plan.
Ang galing naman. It's so nice to hear this, honey. And congratulations. And for me, I want to say thank you. This is a fantastic task you have. And it must begin as a child, and it doesn't even end as a teenager or as an adult. Di ba, patuloy yung pagtuturo pa rin sa tao. Kasi we are faced with so many different circumstances. And the core is most important.
Yes, ma'am.
Haning, maraming salamat sa iyo. Thank you. Thank you to Bay Rohaniza, Sumndad, Usman. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Coming up, a soldier's song went viral during the height of the war in Marawi. We get to know the inspiration and story from the man who bravely fought at the front line. Bye. You're watching a special edition of The Source. It took courage, determination, and sacrifice to fight for Marawi's liberation. We've heard so many stories of bravery of those men and women who were at the front line to regain the city's freedom. But how difficult is it to fight and at the same time write a song in the middle of a war? Let's go straight to the source of the story, Soldier and Bangon Marawi songwriter Sergeant Ronnie Halasan. Sergeant Halasan, good morning.
Morning po. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh sa ating mga kababayan sa Marawi City. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat.
Welcome to the program. Sir, nandun ho kayo day one pa lang sa Marawi.
Opo.
Ano ho ba ang inyong nadatnan doon?
During kasi yung 23rd of May 2017, ay nataasan po ako ng commanding officer ko na maghatid ng mga logistic supply sa brigade headquarters. But along the way, napapansin namin na bugso ng tao na bumababa to Iligan. Then before sa Sagyaran, medyo may nakita na kami na hindi magandang pangyayari. Then tumawag po kami sa brigade headquarters. Then the brigade headquarters advised us to mag-steady na lang sa area. Then mag-observe. And doon ko nakita yung kalunos, yung mga bata na, unang-una po yung mga bata nakita ko na kaawa-awa, na nahihiwalay siya sa kanyang pamilya. May magulang na nawala ng anak, ang anak nawala ng magulang, mga kaibigan. At doon ko napansin at parang bilang isang Pilipino at bilang isang sundalo, hindi ko rin maibsan aking sarili kung ano kayang nangyayari? Kasi hindi lang po ito yung gera na naranasan ko at nakikita ko. During isang Buanga Siege, ganun, doon pa rin ako. At ngayon...
2013, sir?
Opo. Doon po ako nakipagharapan pa rin po sa kanila.
Pero nakaabot ho ba kayo, nakapasok ho ba kayo sa loob, Sergeant?
Sa Ground Zero po, yes po. Na bilang combat driver that time, nung nangyari nung sa Marawi, na nahinto ako doon, nakita ko yung mga bata una. Then, nung time na yon, naisip kong tawagan ko yung pamilya ko. Yung unang-una po, yung misis ko. Sabi ko sa sarili ko, tawagan ko, baka ito na yung katapusan ko. Then, kasi nung tinawagan ko, wala na pong linya ng communication. Walang globe, walang smart, lahat, wala na. Paano ko kaya gagawin ito? Noon, meron na akong ballpen at saka yung isang bond paper na sinulat ko yung lahat ng mga pangyayari. Parang naggumawa ako ng journal o diary sa mga time na pupuntahan namin. But kalaunan, may dumating na mga kasamahan ko upang samahan kami sa loob. Pagdating doon sa loob, medyo napatili kami dahil nga grabe na ang putukan. Unti-unti, 25th day of May, nakarating kami sa brigade headquarters. Then, doon na po nag-umpisa na pumapasok kami sa loob. Kami, sinusuportahan namin yung mga tropa na nandun sa front line. Kami ang nagdadala. Isa rin ako sa mga nagdadala ng supplies para po sa mga tropa. Doon po mismo sa Ground Zero. Habang nagpuputukan, may panahon din na nagpapahinga po yung magkabilaan. Ako po naman ay umupo sa isang tabi ng sasakyan at nagjo-journal pa rin ulit. Ganon. Yun ay kung halimbawa, hindi man ako pala rin sa araw na yon, at least na wala namang communication, makikita yung sulat ko doon para sa misis
mo
ko.
talaga yon.
Para sa pamilya ko.
At kailan niyo po naisipan na magsulat na ng kanta?
katapusan ng May dahil bumalik po kami sa Brigade Headquarters. Upang maghaul ng trupa naman. Ngayon, nung gabi, habang sinusulat ko, may nakita ako ng gitara doon sa Brigade Headquarters. Tapos, tinutuno-tuno ko na yung kanta ko. Hanggang narinig ng isang opisyal, a certain Lieutenant Colonel Joar Herrera.
Opo.
Nung narinig ko niya, sabi niya, "Iho, ulitin mo nga yung kinanta mo." Tapos nung inulit ko, sabi, sama muna tayo, punta muna tayo ng provincial capital. Di ba malapit lang po yun kung napuntahan nyo po yung Marawi, yung provincial capital sa Brigade Headquarters. Malapit lang.
So, pumunta kayo doon?
Pumunta kami ni Sir. Nagulat ako nung may inausap siya doon sa loob ng conference hall. Then may nag-advise sa akin na, "Sir, papuntahin ka daw ni Colonel Herrera doon sa lobby ng provincial capital."
Dahil?
Noon pala,
ipatugtog ka na. Ganun ba?
may hinanda ng gitara rin doon. Ngayon, kinanta ko doon. Hindi ko po alam na kinunan ako ng video ng mga kababayan natin.
Ito na ho ba yun? Yung nakikita natin? O hindi pa to yan? Yan ho ba yan?
Ito po. Hindi pa po yan.
Hindi pa yan? Okay.
Hindi pa po yan.
Iba pa yun?
Yung pinupost na sa Facebook.
Yeah, okay.
Nung nag-viral na nagtaka nga ako kinabukasan, daming kumakatok doon sa sasakyan ko. Inaalam kung ako ba si Sergeant Halasan. Sabi ko hindi. Sabi nila, "Sir, ikaw talaga yon. Sabi ko, "Bakit? Ano bang nangyari?" Sabi, "Hindi mo ba alam?" Kasi hindi ko alam na anong ginawa nila.
Yeah, okay.
Hindi ko alam. So, na-surprise po ako.
So, ang kanta is Bangon Marawi?
Opo. Yan po yung unang kanta na compose ko. 10 kanta na po yung na-compose ko mula nung umpisa hanggang natapos yung gera. 10 po. 10 kanta.
Ang dami niyo palang na-compose na kanta. Alright, so Bangon Marawi, I understand, sir, that you wrote it in, was it 2 weeks, sir? Or 7 days? Isang linggo lang ata, no?
Isang linggo lang po.
Ayan, ito po. Well, alright, sir, we've run out of time. Kayo po ay kasama kahapon doon sa mga pinarangalan at na-promote po. We'd like to congratulate you kasama lahat po ng mga sundalo natin na tumulong po sa pag-liberate ng Marawi. Sir, we would like to thank you, and pag-thank you po namin, hihilingin po sana namin na kumanta kayo. So, thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines, and we leave you with one of his songs, Bangon Marawi.
Sa bayan kong sinilangan, tahimik at sagana sa likas na yaman. Kristiyano at Muslim, magkapatid ang turingan. Isang bansa, isang diwa, isang minimiti para sa isang bandila. Paglubog ng araw, ako'y nagigla dahil bumalot ang kadiliman sa buong madla. Ako'y lumilipad at putok ng baril, umaalingaw-ngaw, nagliyab, sumabog, at batang paslit sa awa ay sumisigaw. Marawi, bumangon ka, tama na ang maling pagkikibaka. Kapatid, gumising ka. Di ka ba naaawa sa bayan kong nagdurusa? Bumangon